The darkness of the tunnel was absolute, a suffocating blanket that pressed in on Khaled from all sides. He crawled on his hands and knees, the rough stones scraping his skin raw. Each movement was an act of will, a fight against the exhaustion that threatened to pull him under. Behind him lay Zicola, a land of strange wonders and even stranger laws, a place that had almost claimed him forever. The air in the tunnel was stale and thin, tasting of ancient dust and forgotten secrets. He could not see. He could only feel the path forward, his fingers tracing the cold, damp walls as he pushed himself onward, driven by a desperate need to return to the world he knew, the world he had left behind. He remembered the panic that had seized him in Zicola, the fear of being trapped, of losing himself to its bizarre customs. The memory was a sharp stone in his gut, urging him forward, away from the glittering facade that hid a dark core. He thought of his village in Egypt, of the familiar scent of the Nile, the warmth of the sun on his face, and the taste of his mother's bread. These simple things, once taken for granted, were now a beacon of hope in the oppressive blackness. He focused on these images, using them as fuel to keep his weary limbs moving, to fight the despair that whispered in the silence of the tunnel. He had to believe he could make it back. The journey seemed endless, a timeless crawl through the belly of the earth. Time lost all meaning. Was it hours, days? He did not know. His body screamed in protest, his muscles aching with a deep, burning pain. Hunger gnawed at his stomach and thirst was a fire in his throat. Yet, he continued, the thought of failure was more terrifying than the physical agony. To be lost in this eternal darkness, to never see the sun again, was a fate he refused to accept. He was more than just a body, he was a spirit, a will, and that will was focused on one single goal: home. He had to escape the memory and the reality of Zicola. Finally, a faint sliver of light appeared ahead, a tiny star in the suffocating void. At first he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, a cruel mirage born of desperation. But the light grew, slowly, steadily, becoming a promise of release. A surge of adrenaline, a final burst of strength propelled him forward. He scrambled, he clawed, he pulled his broken body toward the growing light until he collapsed out of the tunnel's mouth, blinking against the brilliant, painful glare of the sun. He was covered in dirt and blood, but he was alive. He was back. He was home, but a part of him, a part he could not yet understand, remained forever tied to the shadows of Zicola. Back in his Egyptian village, the world felt both familiar and strange. The rhythms of daily life, the calls of the street vendors, the laughter of children playing by the river, it was all as he had remembered, yet something within him had shifted. The shadow of Zicola lingered, a quiet unease that settled deep in his bones. But there was one constant, one anchor that held him steady: his love for Aseel. Her face had been a guiding light in the darkness of the tunnel, her memory a source of strength. Seeing her again was like breathing fresh air after being trapped underground. Her presence was the only thing that made his village truly feel like home again. Before his journey to Zicola, Khaled had asked for Aseel's hand in marriage many times, and each time her father had refused. He was a stern man, a man who saw Khaled as little more than a restless dreamer, not a suitable husband for his cherished daughter. Now, having returned from an ordeal that had tested the very limits of his being, Khaled felt a new resolve. He would not be so easily dismissed. He approached Aseel's father not with the nervous energy of a boy, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced death and survived. He spoke of his love for Aseel, a love that had crossed realms and defied impossible odds. The old man listened, his expression unreadable. He saw the change in Khaled, the new gravity in his eyes, the strength that now radiated from him. Khaled did not plead or beg. He simply stated his case with a calm certainty that was more powerful than any desperate appeal. He spoke of his commitment, his unwavering devotion to Aseel, and his promise to build a life for them, a life of safety and happiness. He had faced the impossible and returned, and this journey had forged him into someone worthy. He would not take no for an answer this time, not when he had fought so hard to come back to her. Perhaps it was the change in Khaled, or perhaps it was the sheer force of his persistence, but this time, the answer was different. Aseel's father looked from Khaled to his daughter, whose own love for the young man was plain to see. He saw that their bond was not a fleeting fancy, but a deep and enduring connection. With a slow, deliberate nod, he gave his consent. Joy, pure and overwhelming, washed over Khaled. He had succeeded. He and Aseel could finally be together. Yet even in this moment of triumph, the strange memories of Zicola whispered at the edge of his mind, a constant reminder of the world he had escaped, and the secrets it still held. The joy of Khaled and Aseel's union was tragically short-lived. News of Khaled's escape and Aseel's role in helping him had traveled back to the authorities of Zicola. In their world, helping someone defy their laws was an act of high treason. Aseel was declared a traitor, a criminal against the state. One day, without warning, agents from Zicola appeared in their village. They moved with a chilling efficiency, their faces impassive as they seized Aseel. Khaled fought to protect her, but he was powerless against their strange authority. Aseel was arrested, torn from her home and her husband, her cries lost in the confusion of the sudden, brutal raid. Aseel was not imprisoned in Zicola. Instead, she was sentenced to a fate some considered worse. She was exiled to Amarita, a harsh and unforgiving kingdom known for its brutal labor camps. The journey was arduous, a long and miserable trek across barren lands under a scorching sun. She was chained with other prisoners, given little food and even less water. The hope that had blossomed in her heart just days before withered into a cold knot of fear and despair. She had helped the man she loved, and for this act of loyalty, she was being sent to a place from which few ever returned. Her life had been shattered in an instant. Upon arriving in Amarita, Aseel was thrown into a life of relentless, back-breaking work. She labored in the rock quarries from sunup to sundown, her hands quickly becoming blistered and raw. The guards were cruel, the conditions deplorable. The fine clothes of her wedding day were replaced with coarse rags, and her life became a monotonous cycle of pain, exhaustion, and hunger. At night she would lie on a thin straw mat, her body aching, and stare up at the unfamiliar stars. She thought of Khaled, wondering if he knew where she was, if he was looking for her. The memory of their brief happiness was both a comfort and a torment. The days bled into weeks, and the weeks into months. Aseel learned to survive in this brutal new reality. She learned to guard her meager rations, to avoid the guards' attention, and to push her body beyond the limits of what she thought possible. The despair was a constant companion, a heavy weight on her soul, but she refused to let it break her completely. She held on to the sliver of hope that one day, this nightmare would end. She had to believe that her story was not over, that her love for Khaled and her own inner strength would somehow see her through the crushing hardship of Amarita. In the bleak landscape of Amarita's labor camps, kindness was a rare and precious commodity. Yet, Aseel found a flicker of it in the most unlikely of places. An old sailor, a man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles and whose hands were gnarled like ancient tree roots, worked alongside her in the quarry. He had been a prisoner for longer than anyone could remember, but the harshness of the camp had not extinguished the light in his eyes. He saw the fear and despair in Aseel, but he also saw the unyielding strength that lay beneath. He decided to help her, sharing his wisdom and a small piece of his bread when the guards were not looking. The old sailor taught Aseel the art of survival. He showed her how to pace herself, how to find the weakest points in the rock to make her work easier. He told her stories of the sea, of vast open waters and distant, beautiful lands, painting pictures with his words that offered a momentary escape from their grim reality. He spoke of resilience, of how a ship must bend with the storm to avoid breaking. His friendship became Aseel's lifeline, a small island of humanity in an ocean of cruelty. She listened to his stories and absorbed his lessons, her own spirit slowly beginning to mend. Aseel, in turn, showed a courage that impressed even the old sailor. She stood up to a guard who was tormenting a younger, weaker prisoner, taking the punishment herself without a single cry of pain. Her defiance was quiet but powerful, an act of rebellion that earned her the respect of her fellow laborers. She was no longer just a victim of her circumstances, she was a fighter. Her bravery was not loud or aggressive, but a steady, unwavering resolve to hold on to her dignity, to remember who she was despite everything that had been taken from her. She refused to become as hard and barren as the landscape around her. Tragically, the old sailor's health began to fail. His body, worn down by years of hardship, could no longer keep up. One evening he passed away peacefully in his sleep, his stories of the sea finally silenced. Aseel was devastated. She had lost her only friend, her mentor, her anchor in this terrible place. The loneliness was overwhelming, and without the sailor's guidance, she soon made a mistake that drew the guards' attention. She was caught trying to smuggle a little extra food to a sick child. For this crime, she was captured and brought before the authorities. her brief period of relative safety shattered once more. Aseel was dragged before the ruler of the kingdom, King Tamim of Amarita. She stood there in the grand hall, her clothes ragged and her body thin from malnourishment, expecting a harsh sentence. The king was known for his strict rule and, honestly, she had broken the law. King Tamim was a young but imposing figure, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He listened impassively as the guards recounted her crime of stealing food. Then he looked at Aseel, this frail-looking woman who stood before him not with cowering fear, but with a quiet, defiant dignity. He asked her why she did it, his voice echoing in the silent hall. Aseel looked the king directly in the eye, her voice clear and steady despite her fear. She explained that she had not taken the food for herself, but for a sick child who was fading away from hunger. She spoke of the cruelty of the camps, of the basic human need for compassion that was denied to them every day. She did not beg for mercy or make excuses for her actions, she simply told the truth, her words carrying the weight of all the suffering she had witnessed. She spoke of the old sailor and the lessons he had taught her about kindness and resilience even in the face of utter despair. King Tamim was taken aback. He was accustomed to prisoners who pleaded and lied to save themselves. He had never encountered someone like Aseel. Her courage and her selflessness struck a chord deep within him. He saw not a common criminal but a woman of incredible strength and character. In that moment, he saw the failure of his own system, a system that crushed such spirits instead of nurturing them. He made a decision that stunned the entire court. He not only pardoned Aseel but declared her a free woman, ordering her to be released from the labor camp immediately. In the days that followed, King Tamim could not get Aseel out of his mind. He arranged for her to stay within the palace grounds, making sure she had proper food, clothing, and medical care. He found himself seeking her out, engaging her in conversation. He was fascinated by her intelligence, her perspective on justice, and her unwavering moral compass. He saw the world through her eyes and began to admire her deeply. This admiration soon blossomed into something more profound. The king, who had ruled with an iron fist, found his heart softening. He was falling in love with the brave woman he had freed from the quarries. Just as a new life seemed to be starting for Aseel and Amarita, a strange and terrifying affliction took hold of her. It began subtly, with moments of confusion and forgetfulness. She would lose her train of thought mid-sentence or struggle to recall simple memories. At first, King Tamim and the palace physicians attributed it to the trauma and malnutrition she had endured. They provided her with the best care, hoping that with time and nourishment, her mind would heal along with her body. But her condition only worsened, her vibrant intellect dimming like a candle in the wind, leaving her lost and frightened in the fog of her own mind. The royal doctors were baffled. They ran every test they could think of, but they could find no physical cause for her rapid mental decline. Aseel grew more and more distressed as she felt her own thoughts slipping away, like sand through her fingers. The woman whose sharp mind and strong will had so captivated the king was disappearing before his very eyes. Desperate for answers, King Tamim's top physician began to investigate Aseel's origins, sending inquiries far and wide. The answer, when it finally came, was more chilling than any of them could have imagined. It came from the dark and secretive land of Zicola. A messenger brought news of a new law that had been enacted in Zicola. The leaders, in their infinite cruelty, had devised a way to punish those they deemed traitors, even from afar. They had developed a method to psychically drain the intelligence from their enemies, targeting individuals like Aseel who had defied their authority. This intelligence, they had learned, could be harvested and used as a commodity. Aseel was not simply getting sick. Her mind, her very essence, was being stolen from her. She was losing herself because Zicola had declared her an enemy and was actively destroying her from a distance. The revelation was horrifying. Aseel was a victim of a new insidious form of warfare, one that attacked the mind itself. The doctors of Amarita were powerless against such a force. There was no medicine, no conventional treatment that could stop this psychic assault. King Tamim was filled with a helpless rage. He had freed Aseel from physical chains only to watch her become imprisoned within her own fading consciousness. The only way to save her, to restore the brilliant mind he had come to love, was to confront the source of the attack. He had to go to Zicola. King Tamim knew he could not storm Zicola with an army. The secretive land was protected by strange powers, and its borders were notoriously impenetrable. A direct assault would be futile and would surely seal Aseel's fate. He had to be clever. He made a decision that risked his own life and his kingdom. He would travel to Zicola in secret, taking Aseel with him, to find a cure at the source. He gathered a small, trusted group, preparing for a clandestine mission into the heart of the enemy's territory. He could not stand by and watch the woman he loved fade away into nothingness. Meanwhile, word of Aseel's plight reached me in Egypt. I was frantic with worry, my joy at our marriage having turned to ash. I had been searching for her tirelessly since her abduction, and when I finally learned she was in Amarita and gravely ill, I did not hesitate. I immediately set out to join her, my path converging with King Tamim's. My friends, loyal and brave, joined me. When I finally met King Tamim, any potential rivalry over Aseel's affections was set aside. We were united by a common goal to save the woman we both cared for so deeply. Our journey back to Zicola was fraught with peril. We traveled through the same mysterious tunnel I had used to escape, a passage that now felt like a gateway back into a nightmare. We had to keep Aseel, who was now often lost in a state of confusion, safe and hidden. Inside Zicola, we found a city that was even more sinister than I remembered. The people moved with a strange lack of emotion, and an invisible tension hung in the air. With the help of a few hidden dissidents who opposed the ruling council, we learned of the terrible truth behind Aseel's illness and the new law. The dissidents revealed that there was only one known way to reverse the intelligence drain. The process required a willing donor to sacrifice a portion of their own intelligence to restore the victim's mind. It was a dangerous, untested procedure with no guarantee of success. Without a moment's hesitation, I volunteered. I loved Aseel more than my own intellect, more than my own memories. I would give up a part of myself to make her whole again. King Tamim and the others watched, their hearts heavy with the weight of the sacrifice, as I prepared to risk my own mind to save the woman who connected us all. As I prepared for the dangerous procedure, our secret allies within Zicola revealed an even more disturbing truth. The new law was not just about punishment, it was about profit. The intelligence drained from traitors like Aseel was not being destroyed. It was being collected, bottled and sold as a luxury product to the wealthy elite of Zicola. These elites believed that by consuming the intelligence of others, they could enhance their own intellect and creativity. The leaders of Zicola had created a monstrous system, turning the very minds of the poor and the defiant into a commodity for the rich. It was a form of human trafficking at its most grotesque. This revelation ignited a fire in me, in Aseel, and in King Tamim. This was no longer just about saving one person. It was about dismantling a system of unimaginable cruelty. While I underwent the procedure to save Aseel, King Tamim used his royal skills of diplomacy and strategy to work with the local resistance. They formulated a plan to expose the truth to the entire population of Zicola. They knew that most citizens were unaware of the horrific source of the intelligence enhancers they saw advertised. They were being lied to, their society built upon the stolen minds of the vulnerable. The cure for Aseel worked. I gave up a portion of my intelligence, and as I felt a fog settle over parts of my own mind, I saw clarity and recognition return to Aseel's eyes. The moment she recognized me, her voice clear as she spoke my name, was a victory that made my sacrifice worthwhile. But our personal triumph was immediately channeled into the larger fight. Aseel, her mind now sharp and restored, became a powerful voice for our cause. She was living proof of the council's cruelty, and her story was the key to unlocking the conscience of the city. The resistance, now bolstered by King Tamim's resources and Aseel's testimony, launched their campaign. They spread the truth through secret pamphlets, broadcast messages on hijacked frequencies, and projected images of the suffering victims for all to see. They revealed the faces of the poor who had been stripped of their minds, their families left to care for empty shells. The citizens of Zicola were horrified. The fight to stop the cruel trade began in earnest, as public outrage grew into a powerful movement demanding justice and an end to the exploitation. The city was on the brink of a revolution. The public outcry was too massive for the ruling council of Zicola to ignore. The foundation of their power, built on lies and secrecy, crumbled as the truth spread like wildfire through the city streets. People from all walks of life rose up, not with violence but with a united voice demanding change. They refused to be complicit in a society that consumed the minds of its own people. Faced with a citywide rebellion and the undeniable proof of their crimes, the leaders had no choice but to surrender their power. The horrific law that treated human intelligence as a product was abolished immediately. A new council was formed, comprised of the brave resistance fighters and fair-minded citizens who vowed to build a just and compassionate society. The victims of the intelligence drain, those who had been left mindless, were brought to special healing centers. With the old technology now repurposed for restoration, a massive effort began to heal them, though for many, the road to recovery would be long and difficult. Zicola began a painful but necessary process of reckoning with its dark past, striving to create a future where every individual mind was considered sacred and inviolable. Peace, a true and meaningful peace, began to settle over the land. With the law changed and Aseel fully recovered, her mind as sharp as ever, it was time for us to go home. We said our farewells to King Tamim, who returned to Amarita a changed man, his heart full of respect and a bittersweet love for Aseel. He promised to rule his own kingdom with the compassion and justice he had learned from her. Aseel and I, our bond forged in the fires of unimaginable trials, walked back through the tunnel, leaving the now reforming land of Zicola behind us. We were not the same people who had entered. We returned to our small Egyptian village, wiser, stronger, and deeply connected by our shared odyssey. My sacrifice had left me with gaps in my memory, but Aseel was there to help me fill them, just as I had been there to restore her mind. We had faced betrayal and cruelty, but we had also found love, courage, and redemption. Our journey was over, but our life together was just beginning. We looked toward the future not with naive optimism, but with a quiet strength, ready to face whatever came next, together. We knew that even in the darkest of places, hope and love could spark a revolution.